Welcome to Matador Memories. I'm your host, Carmen Ramos Chandler, and today we're talking to Martel Okonji. He's the director of the Pride Center here at California State University, Northridge, and more importantly, he was one of the students who helped found the center. And today we're going to go down memory road and talk about the origins of the Pride Center, which is now one of the most important safe spaces on campus for students of all backgrounds.
Hello, hi.
Hello. Welcome. So, you were a student at CSUN, so tell me the origins of the Pride Center.
Yeah, so it really started out with, we were CSUN LGBTQIA at the time, and we met every week Thursday from 7 to 9 p.m. And so whenever we had an opportunity to get outside of that space, we would. We were like, okay, we got to find community, And happening at that time, being on the media, numerous, I think week after week, it felt like there were a lot of suicides that were taking place with students who were the same age as us. That right there, I would say, was our cornerstone to say, we need more. Students were also feeling it. We just came off of Proposition 8. That happened as well, too. We were talking about same-sex marriage. So there was also a lot of social stigma around our community.
I'm going to interrupt you. What year was this? Tell me exactly. Who was president? What was going on at the time?
Oh, my gosh.
Because we're talking about more than a decade ago.
Yeah. So we're looking at 2008, 2009. So I would say the Pride Center, that work, let's go to 2010, 11 as being the launch pad. We'll say 2010. Because what happened, what I remember was Proposition 8, no on Prop 8, passed to yes on Prop 8. But at the same time, Obama was elected. So we were all like, yes, no. It was a really, really hurtful time. And then we were seeing this media side.
Prop 8 was?
So that was, so if you said no on Prop 8, so same-sex marriage was legal. And then what happened is that there was a proposition passed to then therefore say it's no longer allowed. So during that time, we actually hosted a wedding in front of the library where we had an officiant and everything, and so folks were getting married there in front of the library as our protests. And so then in that time, we were trying to educate folks on Proposition 8.
And you were a student.
Yep, I was a student. I was newly also out. I had just come into being I was a member of CSUN LGBTQIA at that time. And then the following year, I became the president of CSUN LGBTQIA. So, I had an amazing board that I was like, that was powerful in that essence, where we were really saying, like, we needed more spaces on campus. So through all this advocacy, through all these movements that we would do, students were also asking for, well, we need to have more events. We need to have more activities. So we were doing this buildup of the Year of the Queer, but also I remember 2 alum that came into our meeting one night and was just like, how don't y'all have a Pride Center or a resource center at this time? Like we had a club membership of practically actively like between 90 members that were coming to our meeting. So we always had a packed room, always had packed spaces. All of our events stayed packed. And then we decided to say, all right, it's time to have a resource center. Like, we need to do this. So Christopher Aston, who is the director of student development now, was the advisor. We worked with him, and he was like, there's the campus quality fee that y'all can start looking into. So we started campaigning. Martin Poussin, who works in our English department.
He's an English professor.
Yes. Those two like really played a critical role in like holding space for us to campaign, to work. Campus Progress, which is, I think they go by a different name now, but they also came from DC, heard what we were doing, and was like, we want to work with y'all. We want to make sure y'all have organizing tools. I got to go to DC for the first time, which was great. And meet a lot of change makers and bring all that back and organize.
What was it like on campus? I mean, CSUN prides itself as being a progressive campus, but what was it like for you as a student who had just come out, as a student of color who had just come out. I mean, there's that intersectionality it's that tightrope.
Yeah. CSUN has always felt like my second home, if not my first home. I think, even starting there, what I've realized is that I think even as like a Black gay man at this time, I was so good at just putting things inside of a bottle and not showing what I was really going through. Where I know for the most part, CSUN has always felt like an accepting campus. I know Dr. Watkins, Deborah Hammond, from the jump was like, how can we help y'all? What does it look like? So it was very, very much so inviting. I know for me, I was really having hard times with family. I think a lot of the students have the same conversation today. Cut off from their family, not safe environments at home, struggling with anxiety, depression, and financial security. If I don't have a relationship with my family at home, how am I going to be able to pay for the things that I need to be successful? So that was one of the things that also carried weight, because we also were like, well, imagine if we had this resource center that can like also give us these resources so we already know where to go and we don't have to also find a place that's also going to learn how to accept us. Because I'd say one thing with the campus was it was almost like, oh, like if you're gay, it's cool over there, but it didn't feel like anyone understood how to really support and like work with us.
Was it like the assumption is we're such a progressive campus, we just assumed you had the safety net?
Yeah, just assume. When really a lot of us were like really at times crying out for help. I know I dedicated a lot of my time into investing in how we can get this resource center, which, my grade sacrifice. But I also was like, well, I have nowhere to go and I also don't have the resources. I actually did before we even started, the one thing I learned was, what do we have? Do that assessment of what's already there. So do an inventory check. So I actually went to the Close Health Center. I went to UCS, and I just did my tour around campus. And we didn't have any resources. I remember going to the Close Health Center and being like, yeah, I'm looking. They used to have like the brochures in the front. And I walked up and I was just like, okay, there's nothing here about men who have sex with men or for gay men, et cetera, et cetera. So I went to the front and I said, excuse me, I'm just looking for something that can just, talk about gay sex. And this was also a time where I'm also just like, wow, Martel, you're bold. You're asking these questions. And I remember she said, okay, let me see what I got. She went to the back and it took a while. She came back with this big box and it was a bunch of like brochures that were completely outdated. And was like, well, I have this. And I was like, oh, okay. All right. And then that was my like, okay, it's time. So we had the president's town hall meeting that took place. And that was when President Kessler was our president at that time. And I remember our AS president was there too, and I didn't remember his name, but he was very strong in his support and passion for what we were doing at that time. And, we strategized and said, y'all, we're going to ask questions until we get the answer that we're looking for. And the answer that has to be stated is, we're going to do the best that we can to support you, and that will be a priority for us, or something along that line. And so we asked the question, I don't remember the exact question, but the question was really primed around, we are trying to create an LGBTQ resource center. Will you support us? And the answer was, we'll see what we can do. And we were not okay with that. So next person got up, asked the same question, so forth, so forth. They even made a statement where they were like, if y'all keep asking the questions, we're never going to be able to get through the agenda. And we were like, well, we're here to ask these questions because this is open forum. So we brought the numbers because everyone gets to ask a question.
Yeah.
So we continued to do different walks for Spirit Day. We dressed in purple and we did like which I would say just a walk. So it was a good number of us. A walk around campus. And then we did a campaign. We were asking for signatures from students and letters. And we had about, I want to say 495. I'm going to go with that number because it just feels like that's the number. But we said up to almost 500 letters, but it was 495 to be exact, from students. From faculty saying why it's important to have this resource center and what it could do for us. So we brought that, and then that's when we got the campus quality fee. And then I want to say about a year later, through meetings and through conversations and discussions, the USU approved to have, the campus quality fee was voted on by the students, and then it got an amount allotted. It was $38,000 allotted for an LGBTQ resource center.
I should explain that for those of you who are not Matadors or who are older Matadors, the campus quality fee is a fee that is assessed by the students upon themselves to pay for much needed resources. They are not state funds. They are actually fees the students assess themselves. They tax themselves so that they can provide these resources. And so the students chose to spend the money on a Pride Center.
And that was what a lot of our campaigning was for, to tell folks about that campus quality fee. And then we had the money, but we didn't have the space.
Look, we got it. Students to back us. We got almost $40,000 now.
We got it.
Where do we spend it?
Right. And then this is when I would say I truly had the greatest moment of meeting Deborah Hammond. And I always say, I just told Deborah this at their retirement event at the Soraya. It was like seeing a Black woman that saw me. And I never felt validated in a way that Deborah Hammond made me feel validated. What
was about it?
It was, so, coming from the Black community, especially during that time, the conversation really is, gay people don't exist. So navigating that, and, I've always felt like I've pushed myself to be accomplished because I was gay. Never because I felt like it was worth the thing to do. So having those experiences and having someone see me for me, and showing all of my full authentic self, that was powerful. And especially in the sense of, no, we want to support you. We want to get this happening. This is important. Y'all have the numbers saying it's important. How do we make this happen? So that to me was powerful. That was truly powerful. And so I always get a little, our events coordinator, who was Tanyella Block. So Tanyella was one of my closest colleagues, one of my closest friends, someone who also knew how to talk to me, who identified with their Blackness with me as well, too. Shortly before the Pride Center had opened, they had actually passed away due to suicide. And so they were also one of the ones who were yelling that we needed this Pride Center. We need this resource center. And so that was hard. It was hard for a lot of us. We recognized, we're all coming, our identities are so intersectional that at times folks are just like, we can't understand you. So we just don't know how to work with you. And I think that's what makes us so unique, because I'm like, if you can work with us, you can work with anybody. I'm like, just take a second to just, listen in and hear what we're asking for. But I tell folks that because, for us, they played a pivotal role in, one, getting us motivated to do this work, but also because they were the ones who were creating experiences for our students at the end of the day. Like, we would have our National Coming Out Day. We would have our queer prom. We would have all these different things that we'd done. And the students showed up because it always felt good to feel celebrated. So the fact that Tanny could bring that to us, that was one of the pieces that, it was so hard. I didn't actually go to the opening of the Pride Center. And actually, which no one knows, except for a few people, I was actually sitting in the parking lot. So I was asked to come, and I had a speech, and I was going to do it with who was my vice president, and also Sidearm Carr, who also helped with the Pride Center as well, too. And I couldn't get out the car. I felt like I didn't do a service to them, which was my own personal thing, because I know that's not something they would have wanted. So, today I'm like, how do we empower and think about that stuff? But that right there, it tells me also when our students are navigating some of these challenges and even through their own successes, sometimes there's something that's holding them back, just from the simple fact of like, how do we build more community and let folks be seen? So that's why I also, on a loop some way, Deborah Hammond helped me feel seen in those opportunities. And so I always say, I think there's more ways that we can continue to do that for our students too.
What was your major? And when did you graduate?
Yes.
You said coming back for the because you had already graduated then.
Oh, I started in business. Did not, business was not for me. Funny, although doing things now. But sociology was my degree. I transitioned into sociology. I actually got disqualified from CSUN, actually. And then came back and finished. And now, fortunately, finishing my doctorate degree. So excited. I'm now a candidate. But I say that in the sense of when I say I dedicated my time having this resource center, I didn't have anywhere else to go after that. So I think a piece of me was also like, how do I find something that's also going to give me the resources I need to continue to succeed in school? So I also note that I think there was a big piece of me that also had this imposter syndrome that was really like, oh, I'm not an academic because I don't see me. People don't talk about my identity. So there's a lot of these identity things that I was going through at this time, especially with my race and my sexuality. So I think there was these two components where I'm like, I'm not seen in these spaces, so I can't exist. So I'm failing because I was going to fail. So I'm like, how do I get
predetermined?
Yep. Kind of piggy hold. Also had a lot of health problems going in and had a big surgery. So there was a lot of things that I was navigating that I think students who don't feel like they can be their most authentic aren't going to share all of these different challenges. And if I would have shared some of those things, I probably would have been like, hey, did you know this exists and this exists and this exists? So I think sometimes me also being able to note that and reconcile with there were opportunities for me in the future or in the past that I could have tapped into, but I'm also really happy with what I showed up with today.
When did you graduate?
Yeah, so I graduated 2015.
So you took a step back. You're allowed to take no one says the journey to a college degree is linear.
Facts.
And no one says it's supposed to be perfect.
Right. 100%. It's never.
But you came back. You didn't.
I did.
You did not give up on CSUN simply because it's almost like a contradiction. You weren't seen, but you created a space, and it felt like home. Yeah. What a contradiction!
Wow. It was, and that's the thing that I think kept me to want to come back. Mm-hmm. It was this piece of when I left, I had also been fortunate through the amount of advocacy and work that I've done, started working at the Los Angeles LGBT Center. So I had this financial stability that I've never also had before, to where I was like, wow, I can now depend on myself in a real way. And so through that, they also were just like, oh, if you want to finish school. And I was just like,
what
cool,
a great support.
Blessing, yes, a blessing. But I've always thought about it because I also knew that I was like, there's so much of a home that I had there. And there was also so much more that I was starting to see of myself, that I was just like, oh, I want to go back to CSUN. Like, I want to finish. And there was a lot of, I was still continuing to stay in touch with CSUN. So there was a way that I was just like, I just got to finish this. I got to do it.
It sounds to me like there was, your journey intersected with the journey of the creation of the Pride Center. And you devoted so much of yourself into the creation of the Pride Center that Martel got lost in the shuffle, so to speak.
Yeah. Really, really was in a sense of, I also was doing something because I just felt easier. It felt easier to say, if I can be validated in a space, then I'm supposed to be here. And I think that, and unfortunately, what I always tell folks, I was like, you don't know you're disqualified until you're disqualified. Yeah. And so I think there was a piece of me that was also like, I'm ready. Like, I can do this. And then I was disqualified. So I was just like, okay, all right. Well, I guess we're going to have to figure that out. But it also was a beautiful thing because it allowed me to also bring myself to where I needed to be. Because then also, I got back to school. I finished my bachelor's. And then I was like, oh, I can get a master's. Like, let me just get this master's. And clearly now I'm where I am today. But even between all of that, the amount of things that I've learned while being at CSUN, inside the classroom and outside the classroom. I also worked at the Career Center for a time, just as much as living on campus. And I have been in so many different civic engagement spaces. I have got to travel the nation and do work focused on what I was studying while I was here at CSUN and having conversations about, I went into doing homelessness because I was also navigating homelessness while I was at CSUN. So it was just like so many different things that I think.
What we should clarify, you worked as a social worker.
Yeah, which I would say, I always say I worked as a community change agent because what I did is I would develop programs, events, and activities that really contributed to young people finding a sense of themselves. And then being able to get connected to those resources and those services. So I never did case management all the time, is what I would say. But I played a role to where I was more interested in like, what's the holistic journey of young people and how do we get them to see more than moving past their needs and even looking at what they could want and envisioning more, exploring more, and giving them those opportunities that some folks kind of just put a cap and a limit at. So it was such a powerful experience for myself that also even contributed to me wanting to go back to school as well, too.
When you came back, when you started at CSUN as a business major, there was no Pride Center.
No.
But when you came back, there was. Yeah. What was that like?
So I didn't even go to the Pride Center yet. Right. I started a space I haven't even accessed. And that was still more so Tanny. Like, I just felt like that was never reconciled. I've never sat with it. But what I did notice, though, were students who were going there. And the conversations that they would have. And I was just like, I gotta go soon. Fortunately, and I don't remember the exact timing of that, but I know the Tanny Block Scholarship started. I know that was with Martin Pousson and myself and raising those funds and then getting that acclimated to move forward.
They were a English major?
Yes.
I think.
No, Tanny? Oh, no, Tanny was music. Yeah, Tanny was music major, yeah. And they were, phenomenal and all of that stuff. So when we started that scholarship as well, too, which, it's interesting. I'm like, all these things I could have also, accessed and provided for myself. I was like, no, my community has it, so they can do it. So I didn't go to the Pride Center, I would say, until maybe the third year that it was there. And it was in its smaller space, and one of my friends was working there. And they were like, Martel, you're coming to the Pride Center. And I went in there.
What was it like to open? You had a vision as a student of what that space should be. But it was a vision because you had never been into the reality. What was it like when you opened that door for the first time?
To see a room packed. And this is before it moved to its newer location. And to be like, I knew it needed to be here. First off, it was like, I was like, okay, cool. So we're not sitting in the space because it was just too many students in there to begin with. It was huge. I'm not even going to say the name of whom was working there at the time. I was like, I'm trying to remember who exactly was working there and telling me about the different programs and activities that were there. But to see it materialize, to be like, whoa, like, first off, like, this is great. We've always imagined a hub that we could all meet at and like then to be able to do the work, and we didn't have to do it at the lawn or we didn't have to go to Sierra Hall and find spaces to sit at. But just to have a place where we also knew, because sometimes we'd also be sitting there with our couples, with our partners, and folks would walk by and be like, so even having to be like, okay, like I'm trying to feel good about being in love and we got this community. But being in that space and then being able to just authentically sit with your partner. I'm like, and I'm just seeing couples and I'm just like, doesn't that feel good, y'all? Like, doesn't that feel great? So yeah, that was a powerful, powerful feeling. And just even seeing when they were like, okay, we need a bigger space. And recognizing that. And I'm just like, there's so many students who then are just, I think, we say there's the 10% of students who identify as LGBTQ. And I'm just like, that number is not really realistic because a lot of us also don't come out. A lot of us don't have these conversations. A lot of us are so confused by our identities because of what society standards say they need to be. So I'm always like, well, we can say 10%, but I'm also just like, it's not realistic. I'm like, there's people in so many different communities who are just like, no, I can't even come to
Isn't that a
terms with
number from like 50 years ago?
All right, listen. This is why I also say, I'm like, yeah, I don't know. what framework, what theory are we going off of now? So I think and that's why I also say like it's a real conversation to have about sexuality and gender, and really recognizing like we're all on this type of spectrum, and some of us, and it's okay about wherever you are on that spectrum. The real conversation is allowing us to talk about how we can be our most authentic selves. And at the end of the day, especially when we're coming to a place of learning, being able to learn about all of that stuff so we can have a better relationship with ourselves, even at the end of the day. If not for the world, that's a larger conversation. So, yeah.
When you first envisioned, when you and Tiny and all the others, first as students, more than a decade ago, 15 years ago or so, and I bet you had students prior to you envisioned.
Yeah.
To hear you talk, you guys were talking about a place where you could gather and maybe pick up some brochures.
Yeah.
That's not what the Pride Center is. I mean, it is, but it isn't.
It's so much more.
What is the Pride Center? What does it do? What has it done, and how has it evolved over the past decade?
Yeah. So I would say, speaking, and then I'll make this drop too, because I know there was the biggest thing we also did was we connected with students from before our time when we talk about the Pride, because there actually used to be a resource center on campus before the earthquakes or during the earthquake that had happened. The Matador wave, they called it. I think it was like the 90s, the mid or late 90s. And they had a temporary resource center because they had all the, what are those things called?
Modular buildings?
Yeah. And then they moved it, and then folks were fighting to have a permanent resource center. So I always said it's the first permanent resource center at CSUN. And so I say that because then what I've realized is that it's moved past, okay, cool, like here's some resources and here's some discussion groups here's how we celebrate. Here's how we're now also hiring folks to get these opportunities in a space they can also show up authentically. And also be able to like really speak to the work that needs to be done in our communities in terms of validating identities and moving towards what I say like a healing-centered engagement approach to the work. So now it's also, we're talking about how do folks think about sexual health and resources, right? We're talking about how do folks also thinking about gender identity and trans identities, non-binary. There's more conversations now where folks are able to say, I think in some of the also trainings and workshops, and one of the trainings I did, I always talk about folks, and I put the acronym up, the LGBTQIA 2S+. And folks are always just like, it keeps growing and it keeps getting bigger. And I say, that's because we're having a conversation on sexuality and gender. And I think we're thinking about these letters and focusing it just there when I'm like, this is such an expansive thing that we're having a conversation about.
Aren't the letters boxes?
100%. I'm like, they're boxes, they're also labels, they're identities, but they're also limitations. So I say like, it's so expansive, which is why I'm like, the more that we can engage in the conversation with it, the more that we could find more of ourselves inside of it. So I the Pride Center now really focuses on, which I say, especially in the way that I'm moving it, is one, having to have a more of a community collaboration approach to our work. And when I say community, that means like, how are we working with our students, faculty, and staff to celebrate, honor, educate, and bring awareness to things. I also want us really thinking really intentionally about identities, what identities we don't have on our team that might be missing in this conversation. And as I said, because it's so expansive, when we're also doing the intersectionality of race, religion, class, all of those different pieces, we're also having to think so much more intentionally about our programming as well, too. So, like, I'm really excited for the years ahead because I know their students who are coming up. And they're also now like, we want advocacy and leadership and empowerment. And, like, those are my, like, I love that stuff.